So our next speaker is the founder of DesignX, which is one of the largest and fastest growing UX design communities in North America. Over his design career spanning 10 plus years, he has had the privilege of working with all types of clients, from established corporations to early stage startups. Chan Zuckerberg Foundation, Quicken Loans, Xero, TeamViewer, Teespring, Miami Ad School, Couchsurfing, and many more. Please welcome to the stage, Preet Singh.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. How was the lunch? Good? I'm just making some small talk to kind of like freshen myself up for the talk. As Jesse mentioned, I've been a community builder, community organizer, so I'm quite aware of the amount of effort it goes into putting together a conference like this. So let's have a big round of applause for Jesse, Elaine, all the volunteers. Yeah, woo! The sponsors that make it possible. Truly, it is. It's almost like a small community effort to bring together a larger community. So I'm Preet. I am a designer / community builder from Toronto. You must have heard quite a bit around like designing products / platform experiences earlier in the day today, and I think for the rest of the programming. My talk is going to be a little bit different. So it's going to be more around designing community experiences. You know, how do you bring people together who feel strongly about a topic, about a theme? How do you connect them, and how do you help elevate their learning together? So that's going to be most of my talk. So a quick run through. So I'll give a brief intro into my story and why I'm talking about community building in the first place. Then also kind of diving into the meaty part of it about like what are the nuts and bolts around building a community or starting a community and then growing it. And then lastly, you always have to end your talk with a few learnings. It's mostly like common sense stuff, but again, usually not so common. Most of the things you're like, yeah, I know about it, I've heard it before. But then usually it's tougher to act on those things. So I will be repeating them a little bit. So brief introduction. So long time ago, I didn't have a beard. Originally born and brought up in India. Elephant is not a good stereotype, so I'll replace it with the flag. And when you're born in a South Asian family, without generalizing for everyone, at least in my case, you get two options when you have to go to university. That's like you choose engineering or you choose medicine, right? Thankfully, with my parents, they were like, okay, you have two options, that's great. You still get to choose. And then to kind of add a little bit of reward, it's the hook framework. So there's a reward at the end. So my mom was like, this motorbike that you really like, you'll get it if you get into a really good engineering school. So I totally sold myself out. Mike Montero won't be happy about the decisions I made. But yeah, it was kind of worth it. But as soon as I entered engineering school, I realized I was not the only one. Everyone was there because of their parents, right? So that's where the kind of the empathy for those things began. But of course, the question that I started pondering upon was like, okay, where do I belong? I am a civil engineer, but of course not by choice. And as life moves on, I kind of took up a job, started making a little bit of money, but that money happiness, of course, doesn't last long enough. Gave up the job, came back to my hometown back in India, and started dabbling in design. And so when I say design, initially that was like dabbling in CorelDRAW and trying to learn a little bit more about graphic design and all. And the choice or the canvas, where I was trying to express my feelings about how I felt about the social issues in India, something I was really passionate about, was T-shirts. And unlike US and July 4th or Canada and July 1st, in India, Independence Day is not a big thing. So I was like, I really want to do something, make people feel proud about the heritage and the history and all those things. So I designed a T-shirt on 1947, which is the Indian Year of Independence. It kind of went a little bit viral, but thanks to India's population, that little bit of viral also helped quite a bit, and eventually led to me starting a small T-shirt company, a T-shirt startup, where the designs were based on social issues. So that was kind of a first foray into designing around communities, designing products with a specific community in mind that I feel passionate about. The T-shirt label or the T-shirt startup did not last quite long. It's quite a logistical, operationally heavy business to run. Lost it for about 2 years, but while I did not get rich by it, I ended up meeting my wife. She's originally from Germany. We met up, through my t-shirt startup. She didn't want to stay in India. I didn't want to go to Germany. We were like, let's go to a neutral place. And we ended up moving in Canada. 8 months of dating, after 8 months, right? So living in and moving to a new country. Usually it's like it completely fucks up or you stay forever. So I think we were the latter. But coming back to moving to Canada, it was a completely fresh new start. And again, the confusions were popping up. It was like, okay, and moving to Canada, I had to pick up a study course. And I chose business because that was the only option I could take for visa constraints. Now I was a business student with experience in design, having run a t-shirt startup, and it was like identity crisis. I was like, what am I? I, of course, was really passionate about design, but the struggle about where I belong was again coming up, and I had all these different masks that I was wearing, and of course, really confused about what my journey ahead is. So I started, trying to find different ways to sell myself or explain people my story. Especially when you have to get a job, right? So you need to, people prefer to see you in buckets rather than showing yourself as a Swiss Army knife. So that struggle was real. What kind of label do I put on myself? One thing I realized was, and I hope or I'm assuming many of you might relate with, is many of us do not have very linear career paths, right? So if you're a designer, you might have started in graphics, then you started doing web design, then product UX became the hottest thing, or AR, VR. Now next year, when AI starts designing all your mockups, you're going to be called something else, and the labels are going to change. And also, you might have dabbled in other things on the side outside design. But there is a lot of learning that happens in all these different subdomains. So as I started going out to design events in Toronto and meet other designers, and there were 15 plus meetup groups, focused on different subdomains of design, I quickly realized that most of the design communities in Toronto and overarchingly in North America were quite fragmented. So there were communities focused just on graphic design, just on UX design, just on service design. But there was not a lot of, at least in Toronto, Canada at that time, not a lot of stuff happening where that was at the cross-section of these domains. So that was kind of my trigger point where I was like, how do I bring people together and talk about these topics without sitting in a siloed, labeled bucket. And so the whole idea was to build a community that was sat at the intersection of these subdomains and was inclusive of all kind of design disciplines. And so that's how DesignX was born. Being the algebra nerd I was in school, I was like, X can take on any value. And I was like, oh, let me call it DesignX. Did not spend a lot of time there. And so I was like, okay, now I have a logo, I have a story, I have a problem I want to solve. How do you actually kickstart? How do you take steps to start that community experience? So from my previous experiences in India, around the t-shirt startup and working on social issues, I was like, okay, I know a little bit of the basics, right? So of course you need a venue, you need speakers, and you need sponsors, right? So those are kind of the three main things that I needed. And then of course the audience would start to hopefully start coming and attending the events. So I'd recently done a project for Miami Ad School, and I was like, oh, hello, it's me again. I'm starting this community. Would you like to host? And that's how I kind of ended up getting the venue. Speakers turned out to be a little more easier than I'd imagined to be. I was relatively new to the design community in Toronto, so LinkedIn was my best friend. I just started cold emailing people. I don't know a few design leaders here who might receive such cold LinkedIn messages, how they feel about it. But thankfully, the first 3 people who were on my the ideal list, and I was trying to aim high, all of them said yes. And I was like, oh, really? OK. I didn't have to go to my backup list. And that kind of got me the speakers lockdown. And then last was sponsors. I had recently got placed by a recruitment firm to one of the well-known agencies in Toronto. And so I knew the recruitment firm made a lot of money off me. So I was like, hello, can you sponsor my event? And that's how kind of I got my first sponsor. So I had the basic 3 essentials that I needed to kickstart the community. And the first event was extremely well received. So again, that was a hypothesis I had that people do want to meet other kind of designers and other kind of people coming from different backgrounds to talk about some overarching issues related to our field and industry. What I did not realize was why did I choose a panel discussion for the format of the event? These were 3 really senior leaders, and I chose myself to be the moderator. So of course, the imposter syndrome hit in real fast. Like I was like, fuck, why, like I could have kept it a talk format or a speaker format or something else. Why did I choose to place myself along with them and moderate the discussion around the same? So like the female you see, Pamela, she's the head of design at Scotiabank. Tom was leading design at Wealthsimple, which is like the wealth front of Canada. And Carlos is like a global chief creative officer of a massive agency in Canada. So again, like 3 really heavy hitter names, and I was relatively a nobody in the design community in Toronto. So 5 minutes before I go on the stage, and this is not an advertisement, neither am I recommending you anything, I'm just sharing what I did. 5 minutes before I go on the stage, of course, I'm really nervous. And I find out that I have a small bottle of Patron in my bag. I'm not an alcoholic. I do not carry it usually. Like when I was making this slide, I was trying to remember. I was like, how did the bottle get there? But I still have no clue how did it get there. But right before I get on the stage, I was like, fuck it, like I'll let people judge how much ever they want. I downed the bottle of tequila, went on the stage, and actually it worked out pretty well. I did not use the bottle today during lunch, just if some of you are wondering. So fast forward over the last, so this was about like 2.5 years ago. So over the last 2 years, the community grew drastically. The events got larger. We moved beyond Toronto to Vancouver, New York, recently in London, UK. The amount of speakers and supporters we had also grew quite drastically, which was really amazing to see. Also, equally, we wanted to bring the community not just at events together, but also online. So, our Slack groups grew drastically, the kind of conversations that happen there. Of course, a lot of work goes into curating those conversations around specific themes, around career stages, and different things. And so it's amazing to see, like people coming together, whether it's as tactical as sharing resources, around filter design and specific workflows. And then you have, even people like Trixie who are discovering their long lost friends back in Vancouver. Or you have people like Tony who are just, killing time making Raptors, Slack themes. It's like to each their own, right? But what we discovered over the last 2.5 years was, the importance of communities and importance of bringing people together. I certainly did not, envision that end picture in mind, but now when I experience all these things, even like events like these today, communities are becoming more important than ever, especially more cross-sectional communities like this, like Layers as well. It's not just the world outside tech that's getting all messed up and fucked up. There are quite a few things internally as well that are starting to happen. Like you have folks, even in UX design, the precedence is being set that you can just study for 6 weeks and you're a UX designer now, right? I think similar things are happening in development as well. At the same time, for folks who are early on in their careers, the confusions around even things as tactical as tools are getting multifold, right? So of course, people are still having the debate on Sketch versus Figma versus XD versus InVision. What should we use? Of course, there is no one perfect answer, and there are a lot of nuances around the experiences we are trying to create, the teams we work in, the culture we have. Even things like that are not taught in school or not as tactical as tools, right? So you have a lot of career-specific nuances that we don't have YouTube tutorials for or courses in the school for, right? So people are still getting confused around, should I be a one-person head of design at a startup and get paid $70K, or should I become an intermediate designer at a larger company and make $120K, right? And those are kind of the questions that generally do not get a black and white answer for. But that's where at least we see a lot of value in bringing the community together and having people access to those kind of shared experiences, shared learnings, that help elevate the whole community together. So how do you actually go about building a community, right? So I sold you a lot on the value of a community, but how do you actually kickstart the community in the first place if you have an idea in mind? So you must be wondering, okay, can I build a kick-ass community while I still keep my 9-to-5 jobs and I'll just automate everything? I'll still get to relax and watch Netflix, and the volunteers are going to run the show, and everything will happen, peacefully. Usually, that's not how it happens. Just as of last year, building communities also takes a lot of time, effort, personal time investment, and a lot of kind of toll on your personal life as well. So even like small examples, last year we organized a conference on design leadership. my parents were visiting in Canada at the same time, visiting us in Canada at the same time. And I actually totally forgot that the day of the conference, the date of the conference was my mom's birthday. And I was so vested, and oh, I'm building this conference, and all these speakers are coming, and all these things, that it completely kind of, skipped my head. I then eventually tried to, before you judge me, I eventually made up for it by embarrassing her with 400 people, singing happy birthday for her and kind of wishing her birthday. All those childhood embarrassments were kind of like evened out. But building a community does take a lot of effort, and it does take a lot of time, a lot of investment. The good news is that the tools are things we already know of, the tools or the frameworks, right? So if you're a designer or a developer, or if you read the Lean Startup book, it's the same old frameworks, right? So you start with knowing your audience, knowing the problem, who are you solving for, right? How are you actually planning to solve it? Getting into the real weeds of the issues that the community faces or the audience that you're trying to work for, road mapping it out completely. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. So even when you're coming up with ideas, when we were trying to do the leadership conference, we just started by researching every single conference that happened in North America. Like I had no idea how do you price a conference ticket. And I was like, okay, let's just see how people price conference tickets. Like, do you do workshops? Do you not do workshops? What kind of speakers do you have? Again, much like how you would design a product or you design a filter. You go on Dribbble, maybe just for the motion design. But you go on to other platforms, other products, and you try and see the nuances of how they've designed their product or their experiences. And once you have an idea, you start to prototype it. So again, put together a landing page, communicate what you're trying to do, design a beautiful mock-up that makes it look real. And slowly, once you paint the picture, things start to come real. So I never imagined that Jared Spool, who I religiously follow on at least social media and his blogs and articles, would agree to be a keynote speaker when I reached out to him. And I was like, really? Again? So that was quite reaffirming and a really good validation of the work that we were trying to do. And similarly, the Toads bag also became real. The color was a little off, though. But fast forward the road ahead, thanks to the community part and involvement in the community, it did really help me a lot into facing this challenge around, what are the different faces or the masks that I was wearing. Over the last year, we, grew beyond Canada, so started chapters in New York, talking with few folks in other American, not US cities as well. Also, our design leadership community global design leadership community has been growing quite a lot with leaders from as far as Australia, Canada, of course, Japan, and other countries. And as of this February, we started, planting the seeds for our community in the UK as well. So the two key learnings, and again, as I said earlier, some of these things might be too obvious to you. But if you're looking to build a community or get involved in one, this is not just about building your own community, but also championing for others or helping support other communities as well. So the two key learnings were, first of all, extremely important to get good people involved, right? And good people, not just the core team, but also people that you work with. So you're ranging from your sponsors. Have been extremely thankful to people like Josh, Wendy, Max is here today from Abstract, folks that genuinely get what you're trying to do, bring people together, help them collaborate, and be more of a partner than just throwing money at you. Extremely important to bring good people into your team. The core volunteer team. While you are on stage, you're getting all the credit for all the work that the entire team is doing. It's really valuable to call it out and then help understand what are their goals, right? Why is someone else volunteering for you while you stand on the stage and introduce and do other things? Also, apart from just empowering them, also celebrating them, of course, showcasing them to the community. If they have any specific goals in mind, if they want to be on the stage or if they want to talk to the design leaders, how can we make that happen? And the second thing is, once you have good people, of course, you're like, okay, great work will happen. But it's not just about just doing great work, right? So how can we push it even further and be really genuine in the great work that we are trying to do? So tackling issues that other communities or other folks won't. Not just focusing on the always the optics around numbers and how big of an event you can do, but really going into the weeds, understanding what the different factions of your community are looking for, and how can you provide a platform for all of them to meet their individual career goals. So again, as I said, not a lot of rocket science around community building. At least for us, it was just about starting with good people and doing some really genuine work for the community. Of course, it is hard, but the first step is also just cutting down, going beyond the fear of having other people judge you. You can use the Patron or not, totally up to you. Because at the end of the day, you have that sense of belongingness, or you want to belong to something. Like, how many of you are watching the NBA Finals right now? Okay, quite a few, yeah. I have no idea who both of these are. I have zero clue of their names. But Raptors are in the final, so I'm like, whoa, yeah, go North, we the North. Because of course you want to be part of that shared experience, right? And it comes from a genuine place, like you're really excited. I won't be scared if you won't clap for me at the end, but I do hope Raptors win. Boo, yeah, I get it. But at the end, we are all humans, right? So at the end, you just want to belong to something. We are all awkward, but we still want to connect with others. We are all have that sense of imposter syndrome, but we still want to learn, right? So how can we strive to bring together these different layers and build stronger design communities is what I'm striving for. Thank you so much.